A quiet black teen walks into Westbrook High. This is a place where the rich kids are in charge, and newcomers don't fit in. He plans to stay out of trouble, finish the year, and avoid attention. But the school's star student, the leader of a group that loves to pick on others, has different plans. The teasing starts small. Then comes the pushing. Then the public embarrassment. When things go too far, he fights back. Not with his fists, but with his mind. By the time he's done, they'll be the ones broken, full of regret. What about you? What was your high school experience like? Before we get into this story, share yours in the comments. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Johnny Carter steps off the bus. The hot Georgia sun feels heavy on his skin. The air smells like fresh-cut grass, warm pavement, and faint traces of cologne and perfume. Groups of students chat and laugh, already in their usual routines. Westbrook High stands tall, a big red brick building with shiny windows. The campus is clean and perfect, the kind of place that screams wealth and tradition. This isn't just a school. It's a place where the kids of doctors, lawyers, and CEOs prepare to run the world. Johnny feels people watching him. He's used to it. The stares, the whispers, the way people judge him before he even speaks. It's the same at every new school. They assume things. Is he an athlete? A troublemaker? Does he come from the wrong side of town? They never ask. They just guess. Johnny tightens his backpack straps and keeps walking. His face shows nothing. He learned long ago that showing too much gives people power over you. So he stays calm, not too bold, not too shy, just enough to go unnoticed. But blending in isn't easy when you're one of the few black kids in a school like this. Inside, the halls are loud. Lockers slam. Laughter echoes. Sneakers squeak on the polished floors. The air smells like cafeteria food and expensive perfume, a mix of normal and elite. Johnny scans the crowd, sizing up the scene. Cheerleaders stand near their lockers, flawless in matching skirts. Rich kids lounge by the senior hallway, talking about vacations and fancy homes. Nerds argue near the library, already deep in some smart debate. And then there are the jocks. They're impossible to miss. Loud, big, acting like they own the place. At the center is Logan Matthews. Johnny doesn't need an introduction. Logan is the kind of guy who demands attention. Tall, strong, with messy blonde hair and a smug grin. He's not just popular. He's the king. Logan leans against the lockers, smirking as his friends laugh too hard at his jokes. Even from a distance, Johnny sees it. The way Logan controls the room. Guys like him don't earn respect. They expect it. Johnny takes a slow breath. Guys like Logan are easy to figure out. They're powerful because people let them be. Johnny hopes to stay invisible. If he's lucky, Logan will ignore him, and he'll survive the year without drama. But luck isn't on his side. As Johnny walks past, a sharp shove knocks him off balance. His textbook hits the floor with a thud. The hallway quiets slightly. A few heads turn. "Watch it," a voice says, lazy and mocking. Johnny doesn't need to look. He knows who it is. Logan Matthews stands over him, arms crossed, wearing his Letterman jacket. That same smirk plays on his lips. Behind him, his football buddies chuckle like this is some rehearsed joke. "Well, well," Logan says, tilting his head like Johnny is some strange animal. "Didn't know we had a new kid. You lost, boy." Boy. The word stings. Johnny's jaw tightens, but he stays calm. He bends down, picking up his book slowly. He can feel Logan watching, waiting for a reaction. Johnny stands, meeting Logan's eyes. His face stays blank. "I'm good," he says flatly. "No problem here." Logan raises an eyebrow. "Oh, we got a quiet one. What's your name, new guy?" "Johnny." Logan smirks. "Johnny?" Johnny Carter. Logan's eyes flash with recognition, or maybe amusement. He glances at his friends. One of them, a bulky linebacker named Troy, snickers. Johnny Carter, Logan repeats, like he's testing the name. Then his smirk grows. Let me guess. Single mom? Moved here for a better life? Or running from trouble? The words are sharp, meant to cut. Johnny breathes slowly, keeping his anger in check. He's heard it all before. The assumptions, the insults dressed up as questions. He doesn't take the bait. Logan waits, like a predator sizing up prey. When Johnny doesn't react, he leans in. You play ball, Carter? Football? Basketball? Or are you one of those track kids? Johnny keeps his voice steady. I don't play anything. Logan's smirk falters, just for a second. No sports? He pauses, almost saying something else, but stopping short. The unspoken words hang in the air. His friends snickered quietly. Johnny let out a slow breath. He had been through this before. The best way to win was not to play at all. Without a word, he walked past Logan, acting like he wasn't worth his time, like none of this mattered. But Logan Matthews wasn't the type to be ignored. As Johnny walked away, he could feel it. The weight of Logan's stare, the silent warning that this wasn't over. Not even close. The cafeteria at Westbrook High was its own kind of war zone. The long tables were split into invisible zones. The athletes sat in the middle, acting like kings. The cheerleaders sat nearby, flawless in their little groups. The smart kids huddled in the back, half eating, half studying. Then there were the outsiders, the ones who didn't fit, scattered at the edges like they didn't belong. Johnny walked in, tray in hand, scanning the room. He already knew where he wasn't welcome. His goal was to blend in. But Logan Matthews had other plans. The second Johnny passed the jocks' table, a sudden shove knocked him off balance. His tray tipped, spilling lukewarm spaghetti sauce onto the floor. Laughter burst from Logan's table. Johnny took a slow breath, gripping the tray tighter. He knew this game. Push the new kid, make him mad, get him to snap so they could call him the problem. He wasn't falling for it. Damn, Carter, Troy said, leaning back in his chair like he owned the place. Didn't see you there. You move real quiet. More laughter. Someone muttered something under their breath, too low to hear, but the snickers that followed said enough. Johnny exhaled. He set his tray down at an empty table, grabbed a napkin, and wiped his hands. No reaction, just cleaned up and sat down. That alone seemed to annoy Logan. Man, you're real polite, Logan called, his voice mocking. That's good. Gotta be polite when you're in someone else's house. Johnny didn't look up. He refused to play their game. But he could feel it, the shift. The students nearby weren't laughing now. Some watched in awkward silence. Others pretended not to hear. This wasn't just teasing anymore. It was worse. And Logan? He loved that silence. Finally, Johnny lifted his head, meeting Logan's eyes across the room. No glare, no scowl, just a look. For a second, something flickered in Logan's face. Annoyance. Like he was supposed to be in control, but Johnny wasn't letting him. Then Logan scoffed, rolling his eyes. Man, whatever, he muttered, leaning back like he was bored. Ain't even worth it. Johnny went back to eating. His hands didn't shake. His face stayed blank. But inside, the anger burned. He had swallowed it too many times before. He knew Logan wasn't done. Guys like him never were. And Johnny wasn't foolish enough to think this would be the last time. Johnny knew it was coming. He had felt it the moment he ignored Logan in the cafeteria. Logan was spoiled, used to winning. He didn't know how to handle being ignored. So when Johnny walked into school the next morning and saw his locker, he wasn't shocked. The metal door was covered in black marker. Ugly words meant to hurt. Thug. Charity case. Go back where you came from. Next to his name, someone had drawn a crude basketball, as if that's all he was supposed to be. The message was clear. You don't belong here. Johnny froze, staring at it. He forced himself to stay calm, to breathe. He could feel eyes on him, students nearby, pretending not to stare but watching anyway, waiting for his reaction. A sharp laugh cut through the hall. Logan. He was leaning against the lockers with Troy and a few other football players, arms crossed, that same smirk on his face, like he was waiting for Johnny to snap, to give him what he wanted. Johnny exhaled slowly. He didn't move right away. Instead, he let the silence drag on, let the tension grow. Then, without a word, he pulled out a roll of paper towels and a water bottle from his bag. He started wiping the marker off. Logan's smirk flickered. Just for a second. Frustration. Johnny cleaned methodically, like he was scrubbing a stain off a desk, not erasing an attack meant to humiliate him. His movements were slow, deliberate, uncaring, and that, more than anything, seemed to make Logan mad. Troy shifted beside him. Some of the other players looked away, suddenly interested in their phones or the floor. This time the hallway wasn't laughing. Logan pushed off the lockers, his jaw tight. "Damn, Carter! You really gonna act like that doesn't even bother you?" Johnny didn't look up, didn't react, just kept cleaning. Logan scoffed louder, voice sharp. "Man, you must be real used to this kind of thing, huh?" That stung more than it should have. Johnny's hand paused for half a second, the water bottle hovering mid-squeeze, but then he blinked, clenched his jaw, and kept going. He wouldn't give Logan the satisfaction. Another laugh came from Logan, but it wasn't as sure this time. He was waiting, needing some sign that he still had control. Johnny finished. He capped the water bottle, tossed the ruined paper towels in the trash, and shut his locker with a sharp clang. Then, finally, he turned to Logan and smiled. Not a big smile, just a slight curve of his lips, cold, unimpressed. A silent challenge. A look that said, "That was your best shot?" Logan's smirk wavered. His fingers curled slightly. His shoulders stiffened before he forced himself to relax. Johnny slung his backpack over his shoulder and walked past him, not breaking eye contact until the last second. Logan didn't stop him, didn't say another word. But Johnny knew. This wasn't over. Johnny had seen this before. The shift. It started small, barely noticeable, but once it began, it spread like cracks in glass. Tiny at first, then unstoppable. Logan still walked the halls like he owned them, still held court in every conversation, still laughed like nothing had changed. But something had changed, and Johnny saw it in the details. The way Logan's friends hesitated before laughing at his jokes, eyes darting to each other, silently questioning if they should. The way people no longer leaned in when he spoke. The way his control over them was slipping. And Troy? Troy was the biggest sign. Johnny noticed it at lunch. Logan was at his usual table, loud as ever, telling some exaggerated story about the big game. The crowd around him nodded, laughed, played their parts. But Troy? Troy wasn't locked in like usual. His fingers tapped the table. His eyes flicked toward Johnny, then away, like he was figuring something out. Johnny didn't smile, didn't react. He just waited. People like Logan didn't lose power all at once. It happened piece by piece, and Johnny was patient. Later, Johnny found Troy alone by the vending machines, leaning against the wall, scrolling on his phone. The hall was empty, just stragglers rushing to class. Johnny stopped beside him, casual, like it was just coincidence. Troy glanced up, startled, then guarded. "What's up?" Johnny said easily, sliding $1 into the machine. Troy shrugged. "Not much." Johnny pressed a button. A bag of chips dropped. He didn't grab it right away. Instead, he turned slightly, studying Troy. "You ever get tired of it?" Johnny asked. Troy frowned. "Tired of what?" Johnny gestured vaguely. "The whole performance." Troy stiffened. "Ain't no performance, man." Johnny chuckled low, shaking his head. "Sure." Silence stretched between them. Not uncomfortable, but heavy. Troy shifted, suddenly interested in the floor. "I get it," Johnny said finally, voice calm. "You don't want to be on the outside. You don't want to be the one people turn on." He grabbed the chips, crumpling the bag slightly. "But you see what's happening, right?" Troy didn't answer. Johnny stepped back, tossing the chips in his bag. "You think Logan would do the same for you?" Troy's jaw clenched. Johnny let the question hang, then walked away. He didn't need an answer. The seed was planted. Johnny didn't have to wait long. By the next morning, the school was buzzing, not with whispers, but full-blown gossip, the kind that spread like wildfire. Something big had happened. And then Johnny saw it. Logan's locker, covered in papers, pages and pages taped up, some wrinkled, some smooth. All of them screenshots, texts, private messages. Johnny slowed, adjusting his backpack, face blank. He'd known Logan would dig his own grave eventually. All Johnny had to do was hand him the shovel. Now it was all on display. Some messages were just petty. Logan trash-talking his own teammates, taking credit for plays he didn't make. Others were worse. Racist jokes, sexist comments about girls, cruel insults about kids he pretended to like. But the worst ones? The ones about his so-called friends. Johnny's eyes flicked to Troy, standing a few feet away, jaw clenched tight. His name was there too, right next to messages that made it clear Logan never respected him, never saw him as anything but a useful idiot. The hall felt heavy with silence. Then Logan shoved through the crowd, face pale, hands shaking as he tore the papers down. "What the hell is this?" His voice wasn't cocky anymore. It was sharp, panicked. He turned, wild-eyed. "Who did this?" No one answered, because no one was on his side anymore. Troy didn't move. The football team stood back. The girls who used to cling to Logan kept their distance. Johnny leaned against a locker, arms crossed, calm. He didn't have to say anything. Logan already knew. Their eyes met. And for the first time, Logan didn't smirk, didn't try to play it off. He saw it now. The cracks had become a collapse, and there was nothing he could do. Johnny tilted his head slightly, voice quiet when he finally spoke. "This is who you are, Logan. The only difference?" He let the words hang. "Now everyone else sees it too." And Logan, for the first time in his life, had nothing to say. Logan stood frozen in front of his locker, fists clenched, knuckles white. His breath came too fast, too sharp. He looked like a man watching his empire burn. And in a way, he was. The hall was silent, the kind of quiet that felt heavy, like a storm about to break. No one rushed to help him. No one tore down the proof to defend him. His friends, his so-called kingdom, stood back, unwilling to go down with him. Troy was the first to walk away. His face was hard, unreadable, but his body said everything. His shoulders stiffened, his hands clenched at his sides. He didn't even glance at Logan as he turned and left. Slowly, others followed. One by one, the crowd lost interest. People whispered, shook their heads, and shoved their phones back into their pockets as they drifted off. No big explosion, no dramatic fight, just quiet rejection. That's how it always happened. People like Logan didn't fall with fire and fury. They fell with silence. Johnny watched as Logan turned toward him, face twisted, rage barely hidden. But it wasn't just anger. It was fear. The realization that he wasn't in control anymore. That for the first time, no one was waiting for him to lead. "This was you," Logan said, voice low and shaking. Johnny didn't answer right away. He let the words hang, letting Logan feel their weight. Then he tilted his head slightly, eyes steady. "I didn't write those messages," he said, calm but sharp. "You did." Logan's nostrils flared. His hands twitched, like he wanted to lash out, to prove he still had power. But he didn't move, because he knew if he threw the first punch now, it wouldn't make him look strong. It would make him look desperate. Johnny held his gaze a second longer, then turned and walked away. He didn't need to stay to see the rest. He already knew how it would end. By the end of the day, Logan's name would be dragged through every group chat, whispered in every hallway. Teachers would finally have to face the problem they'd ignored for too long. His reputation, the thing he built his whole identity on, was already crumbling. And there was no fixing it. When Johnny stepped outside, the afternoon air felt lighter. The heat still stuck to his skin, but the tension he'd carried since coming to Westbrook High was finally gone. A familiar car waited at the curb, engine rumbling. Taryn Carter leaned against the hood, arms crossed, giving Johnny that knowing look, like he'd already heard everything. Johnny slid into the passenger seat, letting his head rest back with a long exhale. Taryn raised an eyebrow, shifting the car into gear. "Done?" Johnny nodded. "Done." Taryn smirked, pulling away from the school. "Didn't even have to throw a punch." Johnny let out a quiet laugh, shaking his head. "Didn't need to." The car rolled down the road, the sun casting long shadows. The weight of the past few weeks finally lifted. He had won. Not by being louder, not by being stronger, but by being smarter, by waiting, by letting Logan destroy himself. And as for Logan Matthews, he was just another lesson, a reminder that power built on fear never lasts. And sometimes the quiet ones are the ones you should fear most. Join us for more meaningful stories. Like, subscribe, comment. Turn on notifications so you never miss a story full of powerful lessons and real heart. They told her to play the violin as a joke. But when she did, the whole room froze. No one even pretended to ignore it. It was fifth period. Nia Forrester always sat in the last row by the window. Same spot, same silence, same old violin case resting between her knees like it was priceless. She rarely spoke unless called on, and even then she kept her answers short. Just another quiet kid trying to disappear. But that day, she became the center of attention, and not in a good way. "All right, listen up," said Mr. Buckley, the gym teacher who was somehow in charge of the school talent show. "We need acts, singers, dancers, magicians, whatever. Step up if you've got something." His tone was half joking, like he didn't really care. Then Miss Dorsey, the math teacher in her usual beige sweater, smirked and nodded toward Nia. "What about our little violinist over there?" she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Buckley laughed. "Yeah, Nia, show us what that thing can do. You've been carrying it around all year. Might as well prove it's not just for show." The class erupted in giggles. It wasn't mean laughter, not exactly, but it wasn't kind either. Just teasing, the kind that pretends to be harmless. Nia's grip tightened on her violin case. She didn't look up. Not yet. A boy nearby whispered something about screeching cats. Another fake squeaked like a broken violin. The laughter spread fast. Miss Dorsey smiled like she'd done something nice. "Just teasing, sweetheart," she added, as if that made it okay. That's when Nia finally lifted her head. Not at the teachers, not at the kids, just past them. "I'll do it," she said, calm and steady, like she was ordering fries. The room went silent. Even Buckley hesitated. "You serious?" Nia didn't answer. She just opened the clipboard, wrote her name, and handed it back. No fuss, no drama. Miss Dorsey chuckled, but it sounded forced. "Well, that's the spirit." But her smile wavered. She hadn't expected Nia to agree. She'd expected her to shrink away. The rest of the day passed like normal. Bell rings, locker slams, sneakers squeaking down the hall. But something had changed. Because here's the thing. They didn't know her. Not really. They saw a quiet black girl who barely spoke, who carried a violin like she was trying too hard. They didn't know about the small apartment she shared with her mom and little brother. They didn't know she practiced with a towel under her door to muffle the sound. They didn't know the violin wasn't just a hobby, it was hers, the one thing no one could take. And now they were going to hear it. But just because she said yes didn't mean she wasn't afraid. At school, Nia Forrester was forgettable, quiet, never standing out. But at home, she was different. The second she closed the door, the violin came out. No breaks, no distractions, just her, the music, and the chipped walls of her tiny room. Her mom's voice drifted from the kitchen. "You home, baby? You eaten yet?" "Not hungry," Nia answered. "You better eat. Don't make me come in there." Nia smiled faintly. Her mom always said that, but she never interrupted practice. Monica Forrester worked nights cleaning offices downtown. She left around 6:30 every evening, right after dinner, and didn't return until dawn. Nia knew her mom was exhausted. She also knew her mom listened from the other side of the wall every night. That was the rule. No speakers, no headphones, just raw sound. If Nia missed a note or lost the rhythm, her mom would tap the wall 3 times. That meant start over. No yelling, no shame, just fix it. "Again, baby," her mom would say, even from the hallway. Most nights, Nia practiced until her fingers went numb. Her violin wasn't fancy. It had scratches from past owners, a loose peg she had to tighten often, and a bow fraying at the edges like an old shoelace. But when she played, it sang. It cried. It screamed. It whispered. It was the only way Nia knew how to speak out loud. She had started learning at 7. Her grandfather, who died when she was 9, had played blues on a beat-up fiddle. She remembered his laugh, how his fingers moved like they were dancing, and his words, "Let the instrument tell your truth when you can't." So she did. At school, kids rolled their eyes when she practiced during lunch. Teachers smiled politely but never asked about it. Not until the joke. Not until Buckley and Dorsey turned her into a punchline. But Nia had already been working on something, a piece of her own. Half classical, half blues, all pain. It didn't have a name. It didn't need one. What it had was feeling, grit, soul, and a secret only she and her violin understood. Because behind the quiet, behind the worn hoodie and scuffed sneakers, Nia Forrester was a storm. And for the first time, she wasn't going to hold it in. But wanting to prove something was one thing. Actually standing in front of the whole school and doing it? That was different. The next morning, the sign-up sheet was posted by the front office, near the broken vending machine. Kids crowded around it, scanning the list for names they recognized, hoping for drama, hoping someone would embarrass themselves. Nia's name sat quietly at number 16. Some squinted, thinking it was a mistake. "Who's Nia Forrester?" someone asked, biting the end of a pencil. "That girl with the violin," another said. "Never talks. Probably gonna play Mary Had a Little Lamb and cry." Laughter followed. It always did. But Nia didn't flinch. She walked past them like she didn't hear. The truth was, she heard every word. She memorized them, folded them up, and tucked them away in her chest like fuel. At lunch, Mr. Buckley stood by the basketball courts, pretending to care. "Talent shows on Friday," he called. "No turning back now." He spotted Nia at the edge of the yard, tuning her violin in her lap. "You ready, Forrester?" he asked with a grin. She gave him a look, not mean, not friendly, just blank, like he wasn't worth the effort to answer. He raised his eyebrows and turned away. In the teacher's lounge, Miss Dorsey sipped her coffee, flipping through the list of acts. "Seriously, who let her sign up?" she asked, pointing at Nia's name. "She signed up herself," said Mrs. Tran, the art teacher. "She's got the same right as the others." Miss Dorsey shook her head. "It's not about rights. It's about awareness. She's setting herself up. You really think she'll stand on stage and not break down?" Mrs. Tran shrugged. "Maybe she'll surprise you." Then she went back to her crossword. Miss Dorsey didn't reply, but her tight jaw showed she wasn't ready to admit she might be wrong. That afternoon, Nia sat on her bed with her violin and a blank notebook. Her mom leaned in the doorway, drying her hands on a dish towel. "You sure you want to do this?" she asked. Nia nodded without looking up. "I already said yes." Her mom walked over and sat beside her, picking up the worn bow. "You don't gotta prove anything to people who don't even see you. You know that, right?" "I'm not doing it for them." "Then who?" Nia thought for a second, eyes drifting to the water stain on the ceiling. "Me, I guess." Her mom smiled and pulled her close. "Then do it right." At school, the whispers grew louder as the week went on. Kids started making bets. Some said she'd back out. Others said she'd freeze. A few even said she might actually play, but still laughed when they said it. Only one person really talked to her. Malik, a quiet seventh grader who played piano after school, caught up with her near the library. "You doing an original song or something famous?" he asked. Nia blinked. "Original." He smiled. "Good. Do something they can't compare to anything else." She didn't smile back, but she nodded once. That was enough. Friday came fast. The stage was set up in the gym. Fold-out chairs, scuffed floors, a squeaky mic. Parents would come later, but for now, it was just students and teachers. One by one, the acts went up. Singers, dancers, a kid who told knock-knock jokes. The crowd clapped, some polite, some fake. Phones were out, recording everything. Everyone waited for someone to fail. Nia sat backstage, her violin across her lap, her fingers tapping the wood like Morse code. Number 16. Her turn. But when they called her name and she stood up, no one expected what came next. The hallway outside apartment 3C always smelled like old carpet and reheated noodles. That's what Nia came home to every day. That and silence, except for the sound she made herself. As soon as her backpack hit the floor, she pulled out her violin. No snacks, no phone, no time to waste. Just practice, over and over. The piece she planned to play didn't have a name. It didn't need one. It started soft, just a few notes, like something slipping out from under a locked door. Then came the shift, the sudden pull that made people sit up straight. That's what she worked hardest on, the change. Her grandfather used to say, "Make them feel like they've been dragged through something real. Then give them peace at the end." She played barefoot on the carpet, her toes curling when she hit a wrong note. She didn't use sheet music. Everything was in her head and her hands. They moved like they'd been doing this for 20 years. But it wasn't easy. Her bow was splitting at the ends. The E string buzzed if she pressed too hard. The bridge leaned slightly to the left. Every few hours, she had to retune the whole thing. Still, she didn't complain. Her little brother, Miles, 6 years old and always curious, sat in the doorway watching her one night. "You gonna win?" he asked. Nia shrugged without stopping. "Why don't you play happy songs?" he added. She paused, looking at him. "I do." He scrunched his nose. "They sound like crying sometimes." "Happy and sad can sound the same," she said. He didn't get it, but he nodded anyway and wandered off. Her mom came in around midnight, dropping her keys on the kitchen counter. Her feet were swollen, her uniform smelling like bleach. "You still at it?" Nia was stretched out on the floor, her violin beside her like a sleeping pet. "Almost done." Her mom stepped over her and went to the bathroom. When she came back, she had a damp towel and sat beside Nia, pressing it against her hands. "You push too hard. Your hands will give out," she warned. "They already feel numb." "Exactly." They sat in silence. Not awkward, just the kind you earn after knowing someone forever. "You sure about tomorrow?" Nia didn't even blink. Monica stared at her daughter. Her eyes didn't waver. Her shoulders didn't tremble, even though her fingers did. "All right then," Monica said. "Make him listen." The morning of the show, Nia barely ate, just a dry piece of toast and some water. Her hands were stiff, but she kept stretching them over and over. On the way to school, her mind was focused. When she arrived, the gym smelled like too much floor cleaner and too many people crammed into folding chairs. She peeked behind the curtain. The room was full. Whole classes, teachers, staff, even the janitor. The assistant principal stood near the back, holding a clipboard. Phones were everywhere. It wasn't nerves that hit her. It was heat. Her face burned. Her fingers shook. Her stomach twisted. 16, someone whispered backstage. "She's number 16. The whisper felt louder than it should have. Nia found a corner and sat down, her violin resting on her knees. She closed her eyes. She didn't think about Buckley or Dorsey or the kids waiting to laugh. She thought of her mom's hands wrapped in a towel. She thought of Miles in the doorway. She thought of her grandfather's words, "Make him feel it." That was all she had to do. But 1 second was all it took. One shaky note, one slip of the bow, to ruin everything. They called her name like they weren't sure how to say it. Next up, Nia Forrester. The room didn't clap right away. Just a few awkward taps, some murmurs, a cough, a sneaker squeaking on the floor. Nia stood like an invisible force was pulling her up. Violin in one hand, bow in the other. Step by step, she moved toward the stage. Kids in the front row nudged each other. Some already had their phones out. She stopped in the center. No microphone, just a single buzzing light and a cheap folding chair. She didn't sit. She didn't speak. She just lifted the violin to her shoulder. Then, nothing. A few seconds passed. Mr. Buckley cleared his throat near the stage door. Miss Dorsey leaned forward, waiting for a mistake. In the crowd, someone muttered, "She's choking." But then, she played. The first note was weak, barely there. It shook in the air like it was afraid. But she held it. She stretched it. She let it grow. By the fifth note, the gym was silent. No whispers, no laughter, just Nia. The music didn't sound like anything they knew, not a tick-tock song or a movie tune. It was deeper, real. Her bow moved like her whole body was speaking. At first, it was slow, careful, like a talk between someone broken and someone healing. Then, halfway through, It changed. Nia bent the strings like they were crying. Her left hand flew across the violin's neck. The sound twisted, pulled, and surged, like something fighting to break free. Her eyes were closed, not from fear, but because she didn't need to see. Everything she wanted to say came through the strings. When she hit the highest note, she held it so long the air felt thick. People forgot to breathe. Even Buckley, who had been scrolling on his phone earlier, was frozen. A few teachers leaned forward, looking uneasy, maybe even guilty. Dorsey stayed silent. As the music slowed, Nia stretched the last note like a thread unraveling. It didn't fade, it lingered. When she finished, she didn't move. She just stood there, bow down, violin pressed to her chest like a heartbeat. The gym was completely silent. Then, one clap from the back, then another, then more. Soon, the whole room was clapping. No shouts, no laughs, just quiet applause, like they didn't know how else to react. Some kids glanced at their phones, ashamed they'd recorded her, expecting disaster. Malik, sitting near the middle, stood first. Others followed. Even the ones who'd said she'd fail got to their feet. When Nia walked off stage, she didn't smile or cry. She didn't need to. She just held her violin tighter. Backstage, Buckley gave her a stiff nod, pretending he'd always believed in her. But he didn't speak. Dorsey didn't either. She looked like she was biting back words. Mrs. Trey met her by the water fountain and handed her a folded paper. "You made them feel it," she said softly. Nia opened it in the hallway. The note read, "When they don't expect you to shine, shine anyway." That night, her mom waited by the front door. She didn't ask how it went. She just looked at Nia's face and nodded. "You did it." "Yeah." "Did they listen?" "Yeah." Monica hugged her and whispered into her hair, "I hope they never forget." But applause fades. Real change comes after the clapping stops. Monday. The sky was gray, and the pavement smelled like rain, the kind of weather that usually made people quiet and slow. But not today. As soon as Nia walked into school, she felt the difference. People looked at her, not with smirks or side eyes, but with curiosity, with respect. Some nodded. Others stepped aside. One girl whispered, "That's her," like Nia was famous. It wasn't fame, though. It was recognition, the kind she never asked for but couldn't escape now. She passed Buckley in the hall. He tried to smile, phone still in hand. "Hey, amazing job Friday," he said awkwardly. Nia gave a small nod and kept walking. Then came Dorsey. She stood by her classroom, holding papers. For a moment, she just stared at Nia, like she was seeing her for the first time. "Miss Forrester," she said carefully, "can I talk to you?" Nia stopped, but didn't move closer. Dorsey cleared her throat. "I owe you an apology. What I said last week wasn't right." A pause. "I shouldn't have assumed. I'm still learning." Nia thought of sharp comebacks she'd saved for this moment. But instead, she just met Dorsey's eyes and said, "You should have seen me before Friday." Dorsey blinked. That hurt more than any insult. Nia turned and walked away. She wasn't bitter. She wasn't angry. She was just done being ignored. In the cafeteria, Malik slid her a chocolate milk without a word. He grinned. "Next time we play a duet," he said. Nia smirked. "You're not ready." Her laugh, just a small one, made a few heads turn. It was the first time most had ever heard it. At home that evening, she didn't practice right away. She sat with her little brother, watching cartoons on mute. Her mom peeked from the kitchen. "You're not practicing?" "Not tonight," Nia said. "You good?" She thought for a second, then nodded. "Yeah, I'm good." Not everyone clapped because they cared. Not everyone who stood that day truly changed. but some did. And sometimes that's enough to start something. Some people won't see you until you force them to listen. So play your truth anyway. If you've ever been doubted, ignored, or laughed at, remember, Naya, remember, silence is powerful, but your voice, in whatever form it takes, is louder. Tell your story. Let them hear it. Ayanna Cole bent down to drink from the water fountain when Bryce Whittaker slammed his hand over the spout and grinned. "This one's for us. You people had your own, remember?" Things like that didn't just happen once. They happened all the time. Words behind her back. Desks kicked as she passed. Teachers who heard everything and did nothing. They thought she'd stay quiet. They thought she'd take it. But what they didn't know was that Ayanna Cole was the daughter of 2 black Navy SEALs. She was raised to endure pressure, read the field, and wait for the right moment. And the boys who thought this school belonged to them were about to learn a very important lesson. She wasn't the kind of girl you corner, and she wasn't about to let them walk away like nothing happened. Not this time, not ever. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe. Go back to the jungle. The words landed like a slap, sharp, loud, and deliberate, cutting through the low hum of chatter in the school hallway and stopping Ayanna Cole in her tracks just as she turned the corner near the main stairwell. Laughter followed immediately, loud and unfiltered, from 3 boys in varsity jackets leaning against the lockers with practiced ease, as though they'd been waiting for her to pass. Bryce Whittaker stood at the center, broad-shouldered and smug, one sneaker pressed against the metal locker behind him, arms crossed like he was posing for a campaign ad. Cody and Trent flanked him, chuckling as they fist-bumped and looked around to see who was watching. Several students turned their heads, hesitated, then looked away. A few girls near the water fountain giggled nervously, whispering without making eye contact. No one said a word to stop it. No one ever did. Ayanna didn't freeze. She didn't show the sting. She kept walking, her expression unchanged, though her fingers curled slightly around the strap of her backpack. Bryce leaned forward as she passed and muttered under his breath. Not low enough to miss, not loud enough for teachers to catch. "Didn't hear me, huh? Must be hard with all that jungle in your ears." Cody laughed again, louder this time, as if that made it funnier. Trent made a drum beat on the locker beside him, mimicking tribal music with cartoonish flair. Ayanna stopped. Slowly, she turned her head, just enough to look Bryce dead in the eye. Just enough to make the laughter falter for half a second. Her voice, when it came, was calm. "You should really get your throat checked. All that filth must be building up somewhere." The smirk slipped, then returned, thinner this time, feisty. "Real cute. Bet you talk like that at home, too. Got that hood rat attitude all locked up until it slips." This time, she didn't respond. There was no point. Words like his were never meant to be a conversation. They were declarations of power, hurled like spears to provoke a reaction he could twist. So she stared for one breath longer, then walked away, her steps steady, heart thudding, every muscle in her back tense with the effort it took not to turn around and break something. Behind her, their voices faded into jeers, their laughter echoing off the walls like the low growl of dogs behind a chain-link fence, dangerous only when no one was watching. And nobody ever watched. The classroom was silent when she entered. 20 pairs of eyes flicked toward her and then quickly away. Mr. Dale barely glanced up from his laptop. "You're late, Ayanna." She gave no excuse, no explanation, just moved to her seat and opened her notebook with the same clean precision she used to fold her laundry and make her bed every morning before sunrise. The habits her parents taught her weren't just chores. They were discipline, ritual, armor. At home that evening, the contrast was jarring in its calm. The house was neat, tucked just outside the city limits in a quiet neighborhood where military discounts were common, and suspicion still lingered behind picket fences when a black family had a nicer lawn than theirs. The living room was minimalist, the walls lined with framed photographs of sunrises over oceans and distant mountains. Not a single one with uniforms, medals, or insignias. That was intentional. Ayana sat at the dining table, chin resting on her hand, slowly turning the pages of her U.S. history textbook, while the faint smell of her mother's cooking drifted from the kitchen. The television in the background played a muted news segment about a local school board meeting, but her eyes never really focused on the words in front of her. She barely noticed her father enter the room until the chair across from her creaked as he sat. Commander Marcus Cole didn't speak immediately. He rarely did. His presence filled a room long before his voice did. He simply studied her for a moment, his broad hands folded in front of him, his face carved in calm stone. "Rough day?" he asked at last. She looked up, hesitated, then shook her head. Same as always. That answer, safe, vague, a neutral report, was her default. And yet today, her voice carried an edge she didn't mean to reveal. Her father's eyes narrowed, just slightly. "Did someone put hands on you?" "No. But they tried to hurt you." A pause. She didn't nod. She didn't need to. From the kitchen, her mother called, "It's done." "Not yet," Marcus answered, never taking his eyes off Ayana. She closed the book, the soft snap louder than it should have been. "I can handle it," she said. Her voice wasn't shaking, but something in it vibrated low, like the hum of a wire pulled too tight. "You shouldn't have to," he said, evenly. "Not alone." Silence stretched between them like a drawn breath. "I'm not alone," she said finally. "Just waiting." He didn't press her further. He simply leaned back, nodded once, and let her have the space she clearly needed. But in his eyes, watchful, trained, unflinching, there was no mistaking it. He was already preparing. The next day, the clanging bell signaled the end of fourth period, and as the crowd spilled into the hall like a current breaking through a dam, Ayana moved through it with the same low, steady rhythm she'd perfected over the years. Shoulders squared, head held high, steps even and precise. Every glance that lingered too long, every half-laughed slur tossed in her direction, every elbow that brushed just a little too hard against her side. She absorbed it all in silence, never breaking stride. She turned down the corridor leading past the gym toward the water fountains, her breath still sharp from a relentless PE circuit. Sweat clung to her collarbone, and the ache in her calves from sprinting uphill drills throbbed with each step. The fountain was old, unpolished chrome with a chipped basin and rust staining the floor beneath it. She bent slightly, one hand pressing the button. The stream barely rose before it stopped. A hand had cut off the water. She looked up. Bryce Whitaker stood over her, fingers planted over the spout like a lock and key. He didn't speak right away. His smile said more than any word could. Behind him, Cody leaned against the adjacent wall, arms crossed, chewing gum with a smirk, and Trent stood with a football balanced between his hands like a prop for a punchline waiting to land. "You're really thirsty, huh?" Bryce asked, voice mockingly polite. Ayana straightened slowly, her hand falling away from the button. "It's a fountain," she said evenly. "Not a border checkpoint." Bryce tilted his head. "Didn't you people used to have your own?" Trent's face split into a grin, and Cody gave a low, exaggerated whistle, like a sitcom audience reacting on cue. "I mean, not that long ago, right?" Bryce continued, eyes narrowing as he leaned closer. "Just a couple decades back. 2 fountains. One for us. One for your kind. You know, back when things were a little more organized." Ayana didn't move, but the silence that passed between them was no longer passive. She held his stare, her face unreadable, though a quiet fire stirred beneath her calm. Cody stepped forward now, pointing to the busted metal sign still bolted loosely above the fountain. "Bet you could carve out a new one. All caps. Colored. Make it feel real authentic." Trent chuckled. "Put it in the yearbook. A little throwback section. History matters." Bryce laughed and drummed his fingers against the spout again. water dribbling out and splashing onto the floor. Ayana's voice cut through them. Low, sharp, unblinking. You mean the kind of history your grandfather probably buried in a drawer before the FBI showed up? That took the air for a half-second. Bryce's expression flickered, just slightly, before he recovered. What's that supposed to mean? He asked, the mockery in his tone beginning to fray. She raised a brow. Just sounds like you're real nostalgic for something that didn't end in your favor. You missing the part where your side lost? Cody's gum snapped between his teeth. You better watch how you talk. Ayana turned to face them fully now, her voice steady. Why? You'll what? More dead racists at me? Push me into a locker? Upload it to Snapchat with a funny caption? Trent shifted his weight uncomfortably. Bryce stepped in closer, chest puffed slightly, trying to regain control. No, but we could make it real clear you don't belong here, and I'll make sure the whole world sees what that looks like, she replied. In color. High definition. No filters. Bryce opened his mouth, but the words never came. Hey! A voice barked down the hall, sharp and unwelcome. All four of them turned as Mr. Heller, the assistant football coach who also taught economics, strode toward them, clipboard in hand, eyes narrowed beneath his cap. What's going on here? Ayana took a step back, her expression tightening. She knew exactly how this worked. Bryce turned toward the teacher first, arms raised in mock innocence. Nothing, coach. We were just joking around. She got a little heated. Mr. Heller looked between them. Bryce, Cody, Trent, then Ayana. You yelling? He asked her. I was responding, Ayana said slowly. To what? Ask them. The coach gave a long, disappointed sigh, the kind used to avoid accountability without having to actually address anything. Doesn't matter what was said. This is not the time or place to be having arguments. It wasn't an argument, Bryce added smoothly. Just a misunderstanding. Mr. Heller nodded. Then walk away, all of you, and next time, keep it down. These halls carry sound. The boys dispersed without further protest, their shoulders shaking with restrained laughter, their eyes gleaming with the smugness that only ever followed victory. As Bryce passed Ayana, he muttered, That mouth of yours is gonna get you in trouble. Ayana didn't move. Her fists stayed unclenched. Her stance remained even, but her voice, low enough only he could hear, followed him like a fuse catching flame. Good. Maybe trouble's overdue. She turned and walked back toward class, her throat tight, stomach coiled, the moment echoing in her mind long after it had passed. Not just the words, but the silence afterward, the way the teacher hadn't asked what had been said. Only who had raised their voice. Later, at home, her mother passed her a bottle of water as Ayana sat on the porch, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the lawn. She didn't say a word, but the bottle was cold, and the silence between them was warm. Her mother didn't speak at first, just eased down beside her with the quiet grace of someone who had spent years learning how to make herself smaller in unfriendly rooms, and years more making herself impossible to ignore. Raquel Cole didn't waste movement, didn't fidget, didn't fill silence with questions. She simply waited, knowing her daughter would speak when ready, and Ayana did. They blocked the water fountain today, she said, her voice flat. Not because she felt nothing, but because feeling everything would have been too much. Raquel's head turned slowly, her expression unreadable in the dimming light. Did they touch you? No, Ayana replied. They made jokes about segregation, about how it should come back, like it was a punchline instead of something real. Raquel's jaw worked just once, before she nodded, not in agreement, never that, but in recognition. Ayana leaned her head back, exhaling through her nose, and then the coach came over. Didn't ask what happened, just who was loud. Sent us all away like it was nothing, like it always is. Raquel studied her daughter's profile for a moment, eyes narrowing slightly. You didn't snap? No, you wanted to. Yes. Another pause. You wouldn't have been wrong to. I know. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of unsaid things, decades of them, woven through blood and memory and breath. After a while, Raquel shifted slightly. Her voice quieter now, but no softer. "You know I grew up in East Texas, right?" Ayanna nodded faintly. Her mother had mentioned it before, rarely, and never with much detail. "We lived near a town called Jasper," she continued, gaze distant now, fixed somewhere beyond the backyard. "You'd think the worst of it would have been over by the time I was your age. But the truth is, hate doesn't care what decade it is. I remember walking to school with rocks thrown at my back, getting sent to the office for disrupting the class when I corrected the teacher about Frederick Douglass. They told me I had an attitude, that I was intimidating. I was 13. Ayanna turned slightly now, watching her mother speak not with emotion, but with clarity, like she had lived it so often that the pain no longer shocked her, only confirmed what she already knew about the world. "They laughed when I made honor roll," Raquel said. "Mocked me for using big words. Said I talked white. Said I thought I was better than them. I stayed quiet at first, like you do. Thought maybe if I was perfect, they'd stop trying to break me." Her eyes turned now, sharp and steady. They didn't. Ayanna didn't interrupt. She just listened. And in that listening, something inside her settled, like pieces shifting into place. "They got scared when I stopped pretending," Raquel went on. "Scared when I looked them in the eye and stopped apologizing for being smarter, for being stronger. When I enlisted, they said I'd never make it past basic. I graduated top 3 in my class, deployed 6 times, cleared rooms most men refused to enter. And now," she gestured broadly to the home behind them, to the quiet neighborhood with its trimmed hedges and silent tension. "They nod politely at me at HOA meetings, but won't look me in the eye at the supermarket." Ayanna looked down, her voice tight. "And now I'm dealing with the same garbage you did. Different faces, same script." Her mother reached over, placed a hand lightly on her knee. "Maybe. But you've got something I didn't." "What?" "A name that's already feared. A foundation that doesn't crack. And parents who've fought on soil most people can't even find on a map. You think we trained you just to defend yourself?" Ayanna met her gaze, brows knit. "We trained you to recognize pressure, to know when to hold, when to strike, and when to wait. They don't see it now. But you're not a target. They're the ones walking blind through a minefield." A flicker of something passed over Ayanna's face. Not relief, not pride, just a quiet understanding. Like the weight on her chest had shifted into something she could carry upright. "They keep trying to remind me I don't belong," she said after a moment. Her mother smiled, but it wasn't kind. It was the smile of someone who'd stood on foreign soil with nothing but instinct and steel to guide her, then show them why they're afraid. Ayanna nodded, slow, measured, and stood, brushing off the dust from her sweatpants. Behind her, the porch light flickered on as if to confirm what she already knew. This wasn't over. Not yet. The late bell had rung, and the back lot behind the gym was almost empty now, save for the distant rumble of a lawnmower chewing through patchy grass on the far field, and the low mechanical hum of the building's rooftop AC units vibrating against the still air. Ayanna stepped out alone, her path angled toward the quiet side gate where she liked to wait for her ride. It was the one place in the entire school that felt remotely untouched, where no cameras watched and no cliques hovered in corners pretending not to stare. She had just adjusted the strap of her backpack when she heard it. "You're a real piece of work. You know that." The voice came from behind her, familiar, slow, and sharpened with something just shy of hate. She didn't turn immediately. She didn't need to. Bryce Whitaker was the only one who spoke like he was smiling with a knife between his teeth. When she finally turned, he was leaning against the brick wall beside the dumpster enclosure. Arms crossed, one boot heel braced lazily against the wall, like he had all the time in the world. "Waiting for your chauffeur?" he asked, lifting his chin. Or you Uber out of here like a peasant? Ayanna didn't answer right away. She looked at him. Really looked. At the carefully disheveled hair, the too clean varsity jacket, the forced confidence in the way he leaned. He was trying too hard to look comfortable, which meant he wasn't. You came out here just to stand by a dumpster and embarrass yourself? She said at last, voice light, almost amused. His smirk twitched. Just figured we should have a talk, you and me. Clear the air. She stepped closer, not enough to provoke, but enough to signal that she wasn't afraid of proximity. You want to clear the air? Then stop choking it with your insecurity. Excuse me? You've got something to say, she continued, tone still even, still calm. But instead of saying it, you hide behind jokes, behind your little fan club, behind teachers who pretend not to hear. You act like you run this place, but you're just another insecure white boy with a spotlight addiction and a superiority complex. The smirk vanished now, replaced by a colder stillness. You think you're tough, don't you? He said, stepping forward. You walk around like you're better than everyone, like we're beneath you. I walk like I know who I am, she said. You walk like you're hoping no one notices how scared you are. Scared? He scoffed. Of you? No, she said softly. Of being ordinary. Of not mattering once you take that jersey off. Of the fact that your talent peaked in high school and your dad still has to make a few calls to keep your path clear. His jaw tightened. That one had hit. You think you know me? I don't need to. You broadcast yourself loud enough for everyone to see. You're a cliché with cleats. Every weak man who's ever needed to tear down someone smarter than him just to feel tall. He blinked. Once. His chest rose slightly. Deeper breath than before. I bet you rehearse these speeches in the mirror, don't you? He shot back. But it lacked weight now, the words sounding more like an echo than a strike. Ayanna tilted her head. No. I just listen, and you're loud enough for me to memorize you without trying. Keep running that mouth, Cole. You're gonna talk yourself into something you can't get out of. You mean like facts, receipts, audio files? His eyes narrowed now, body shifting forward half a step. You recording me right now? I don't have to, she said. You've said enough in public. If you think I'm the only one listening, you're not just dumb, you're delusional. He stepped in again, closer than before. Too close. The tension coiled in the space between them like wire pulled taut. You think your parents can protect you? He asked, voice lower now, venom curling in the back of his throat. You think some military tough guy dad's gonna scare me? Ayanna didn't step back. She didn't even blink. My parents don't need to scare you, she said. Because the truth is already doing that. Bryce looked at her. Really looked. And for the first time since they'd met, he didn't have a response. Just the rising color of embarrassment in his cheeks and the flicker of rage that always followed when someone like him got beat without a single punch being thrown. You've been waiting for a reason, he said, his voice tightening. One slip-up, one moment. That's all you need, right? To play the victim. She exhaled, slow and deliberate. The difference between you and me is that I don't need to pretend anything. I don't need to fake strength or borrow power. I don't need to lie. You need a lie, just to stand here. Bryce's lips parted, but whatever he was about to say vanished into the air between them. A horn honked in the distance, her ride turning onto the side road. Ayanna turned, unbothered, unhurried, and walked past him without a glance, but her voice drifted back over her shoulder as she passed. Quiet, steady, lethal. Next time you want to feel powerful, try doing something that doesn't make you look pathetic. She didn't wait for his answer. She didn't have to. Monday came with a gray sky and a restless wind that whipped leaves through the courtyard and rattled the flagpole outside the main entrance. The building buzzed with a different kind of energy that morning, not the usual hum of gossip and routine, but something heavier, quieter, like a storm rolling in too slowly to notice until it was already overhead. Ayana walked the halls the same way she always did, head high, steps measured, shoulders relaxed, but alert. But this time, eyes followed her longer. Conversations paused when she passed. The tension from her verbal takedown of Bryce hadn't vanished over the weekend. If anything, it had metastasized, passed like a virus through whispered locker room stories and half-true retellings in group chats. She hadn't posted anything. She hadn't bragged or spread the story. She didn't have to. The silence was its own broadcast. She found herself outside again after final bell, leaning against the brick wall near the gym, her bag slung at her side as she waited for her ride. The lot was mostly empty, only a few late buses humming at the curb, and a handful of kids trailing off toward the fields. She'd started avoiding the front of the school when she could. Fewer eyes out here. Fewer chances for someone to try her in the open. The footsteps came fast and sharp behind her. She knew it was him before he spoke. "You think that was funny?" She turned slowly. Bryce stood 10 feet away, jaw tight, eyes burning with something barely held back. His posture was different now. Gone was the lazy, swaggering confidence. What stood before her was not performance. It was something desperate and unfiltered. She didn't respond. She simply looked at him, waiting. "You think you get to talk to me like that? Humiliate me," he said, his voice rising. "You think this is a game?" "No," Ayana said quietly. "I think you lost the one you started." He stepped forward. She didn't flinch. "You run your mouth and hide behind your last name," he spat. "You think you're safe just 'cause your parents wear uniforms?" She shook her head slowly. "I'm not hiding behind anything. I stand in the open. You're the one creeping up behind girls in parking lots." That one landed. His face flushed deeper, his breathing faster now. "Say something like that again," he started. "What?" she asked, voice still calm, still cutting. "You'll hit me?" There was a pause. It hung between them like held breath. He didn't answer. And then he moved. Fast. Sloppy. Rage instead of control. He grabbed at the strap of her bag, yanked hard, trying to throw her off balance, to drag her forward. He didn't understand what she'd been trained for. Her body moved before her mind had to catch up. She stepped into the pull, shifted her weight, and twisted sharply, using his own momentum to wrench the strap free from his grasp. His shoulder turned toward her, unguarded, and she planted her foot between them to stop his lunge, pushing him back with a firm palm to the center of his chest. He stumbled, arms flailing slightly to regain footing, but didn't fall. "Not yet. You want to make this physical?" she said, breath calm, heart steady. "Is that how far gone you are?" He charged again. This time he didn't grab. He swung. Wild, clumsy, open-handed, but it was a swing. Ayana ducked low and to the side, just enough for the blow to cut air instead of skin. As he overextended, she rose up, gripped his forearm mid-motion, and twisted. Not enough to break, but enough to make him feel the edge of what she was capable of. Her body pivoted smoothly, one leg bracing behind his, and in one practiced, effortless motion, she dropped him to the ground. The sound of him hitting the concrete cracked across the space. A silence followed. One heartbeat, then another. And then the scream, shrill and performative, from across the lot. Oh my God! She just slammed him. Ayana turned her head to see two students, girls she barely recognized from the back row of history, holding up phones, already recording. Bryce groaned on the ground, dazed but not hurt, dragging himself upright with a stunned look that couldn't decide between fury and disbelief. "You saw that!" one of the girls shouted. "She attacked him!" Ayana took a step back, breathing steady but deep now, her hands raised slightly. Not in surrender, but in control. She didn't move toward him. She didn't speak again. A teacher appeared at the door, a security officer just seconds behind him. Their footsteps pounded against the pavement. "Back up! Everyone back up!" Voices collided. Students yelled from across the lot. Bryce's voice rose in the chaos, filled with righteous indignation now. "She threw me! She threw me! The officer moved toward Ayanna, hand hovering near his belt, not on his gun, but close enough for her body to tense. Hands where I can see them, he said sharply. She complied, not out of guilt, but out of survival. She attacked me, Bryce barked again. I didn't touch her. Is that true? The teacher asked, eyes bouncing between them. Ayanna didn't answer. She didn't have to. Because 3 phones were recording, and not one of them had captured the beginning. The silence in the main office wasn't born of peace. It was curated, cultivated, and polished like the nameplates that lined the reception desk. A soft instrumental melody played overhead from a speaker mounted near the ceiling. Some delicate piano loop that tried to soften what had just happened out in the parking lot, as if music could erase violence or reorder time. Ayanna sat still in the upholstered chair outside the principal's office, her backpack at her feet, her hands folded loosely in her lap. Her heart had settled. Her breathing had long since returned to its natural rhythm. But there was something sharper behind her eyes now, something too quiet to be rage and too heavy to be fear. The receptionist gave her polite, practiced glances every few minutes, but never spoke. Students didn't belong in this part of the building unless they had done something wrong, or unless someone needed to be reminded that they weren't invincible. The office door finally opened. "Come in," Principal Larkin said, gesturing lightly, her tone somewhere between forced calm and subtle condescension. Ayanna rose and entered, eyes scanning the room out of habit. Diplomas, plaques, a school spirit banner folded neatly in the corner. Everything arranged with the precision of someone who cared more about presentation than the things they claimed to value. Principal Larkin waited until the door clicked shut behind them before sitting behind her desk with a sigh that was too dramatic to be sincere. "Ayanna," she began, folding her hands neatly on the blotter, "this is not how I wanted to end today." Ayanna said nothing. She didn't look at the photo of Larkin's family framed on the corner of the desk. She didn't acknowledge the untouched stack of policy manuals nearby. She only looked at the woman's face, waiting. "We've reviewed several student videos of the incident," Larkin continued, her tone adopting that careful rhythm adults use when they're trying to convince themselves they're being fair. "The footage shows you slamming another student to the ground. That's the part everyone sees. That's the part that's spreading online. No one filmed the part where he grabbed me," Ayanna said, her voice even, unflinching. Larkin offered a tight, regretful smile. "I understand that. I really do. But without that evidence, we have to act based on what's verifiable. Unfortunately, the footage paints a very clear picture." Ayanna kept her expression unreadable. "So the lie becomes the truth because it fits in a file." "It's not about lies or truth, Ayanna," Larkin said quickly. "It's about optics, about protecting the entire student body and preventing further disruption." There it was again. Optics. That quiet, insidious word. "You're suspending me," Ayanna said. Not as a question. She already knew. 5 days, Larkin replied, tone lowering slightly, as though she were offering some kind of mercy. "Out of school. You'll be allowed to make up your assignments and resume classes next week. We're calling it mutual engagement, so it won't go on your permanent record." Ayanna blinked once. "I defended myself," she said calmly. "I used control. I didn't escalate. I didn't hit him. I stopped him." "I believe you," Larkin said too quickly, too automatically. "But our hands are tied when public perception starts to shape the conversation." "Public perception," Ayanna repeated, her voice flat now. "Not facts. This is the best path forward," Larkin said, her voice softening as she reached for a manila folder. "Sign here. You can return to class next Monday." Ayanna didn't look at the paper right away. She stared at the pen instead, the small, meaningless gesture they always used to make you complicit in your own silencing. She reached for it, slowly, fingers curling around the plastic barrel with a calm she didn't feel. "Do I get a copy?" she asked. Larkin blinked. "Excuse me?" "A copy of the report," Ayanna said. "What I'm signing. I want it for my records." Larkin hesitated. That's not usually necessary for students. It is for me, Ayanna said. Their eyes met. Larkin held the stare for 1 second longer than she was comfortable with. Then she turned, clicked open a drawer, and retrieved a photocopy. Of course, she said smoothly, passing it across the desk. Ayanna signed, took the paper, folded it neatly into her bag. She stood. I'll have my assignments emailed to you, Larkin added. We'll make sure this doesn't affect your GPA. Ayanna looked down at her. That's not what I'm worried about. She turned and walked out without another word. The building seemed quieter than usual as she made her way down the side hallway toward the exit. The shadows were longer now, stretching across the tiled floor in muted strips of dusk. She walked past the lockers without looking at them, past the library, past the classroom where she had first overheard someone call her a scholarship mascot under their breath during freshman year. Outside, the wind had picked up again. She stepped out into it like it was waiting for her. At home, the lights were already on. Her father's truck was parked clean in the driveway, tires aligned like every detail had been measured. The porch light glowed softly above the front door. From the street, it looked like peace, like order, like a family with nothing to fear. Ayanna stood at the end of the walkway for a moment, the paper still resting in the side pocket of her backpack. The scent of peppered chicken and jasmine rice drifted through the house as Ayanna stepped through the front door, the warmth of the kitchen light glowing down the hallway, casting long shadows across the polished hardwood floor. Her footsteps were quiet, not out of fear or guilt, but something deeper, intention. Her backpack hung heavier tonight, not from books, but from silence. The folded suspension notice pressed against her side like a secret waiting to be dropped. Not gently, but with weight. She stepped into the kitchen just as her mother turned from the stove, spoon in hand, brow already lifting in recognition. "You're late," Raquel said, though her tone was more observation than scolding. "Got held up," Ayanna replied, setting her bag by the table. "I need to talk to both of you." Marcus looked up from the kitchen island where he had been slicing into a baked sweet potato, his posture instantly shifting, shoulders rising slightly, eyes narrowing as they always did when something didn't feel right. Raquel turned off the burner. "What happened?" Ayanna took her time answering. She pulled out a chair, sat down, and set her folded hands on the table like she was preparing to give a report. "There was a fight," she said. Silence followed, brief but thick. Marcus set his fork down with deliberate care. "Start from the beginning." Ayanna didn't embellish. She didn't dramatize. She laid it all out, her voice steady and controlled, walking them through Bryce's ambush in the lot. The shove, the swing, the way she had neutralized him without throwing a single punch. She explained the phones, the girls recording only what they wanted to see, and the moment security arrived too late to catch anything that mattered. Then she told them about the office, about Principal Larkin's tone, her carefully chosen words, about the suspension. Raquel's expression was unreadable as she leaned against the counter, arms folded, jaw tight. Marcus didn't blink as she spoke, just listened with the stillness of a man used to waiting out lies before acting. When she finished, neither parent spoke immediately. Then Marcus asked, his voice low, "And what, exactly, did the principal say when you told her what Bryce did first?" Ayanna hesitated, just for a breath. She didn't care. Said the videos told the story. Said it's about perception. "Optics!" Raquel pushed off the counter, set the spoon down with a sharp clink, and moved toward the dining room where her phone sat charging. "I'm calling the superintendent," she said. "Tonight." "No," Ayanna said quickly, her voice firmer than she'd expected. "Don't." Raquel stopped mid-stride. Marcus looked over, brow lifting just slightly. "I'm handling this," Ayanna said. "On my terms." Raquel turned fully now. "Handling what?" "You just got suspended for defending yourself, and your school is protecting a violent racist because his daddy probably bought them a new scoreboard. You think silence will change that?" "I'm not being silent," Ayanna said. I'm being smart. Marcus tilted his head slightly, studying her. You're afraid this turns into a media thing, he said, that people only hear the part they want to hear. I know how they twist it, Ayanna said, looking between them. If you step in now, they'll say I used you to fight for me, that I ran to the big bad military parents, that I couldn't stand on my own. You shouldn't have to stand alone, Raquel said, eyes narrowing. I'm not, Ayanna replied. You've already trained me for this. You've been training me since I was old enough to stand. You taught me how to hold a line. Now I'm holding it. Raquel opened her mouth, but Marcus held up a hand. He looked at his daughter for a long moment, really looked, and what he saw wasn't a teenager begging for help, but a young woman anchoring herself in the middle of a storm, choosing, deliberately, to fight with discipline instead of noise. What's your plan? He asked, not condescending, curious. I've been documenting everything, she said. Audio, dates, names. I know what I can prove. I'm going to collect more. I'm going to make sure when the truth hits, it doesn't miss, and I'm not giving them any reason to say I lost control. Raquel's mouth tightened. You shouldn't have to play chess with people who already flipped the board. But I'm good at chess, Ayanna said quietly. That landed heavier than anything else. Marcus leaned back slowly, arms folding. You understand? If we let you do this, there's no halfway. You'll have to be sharper than them every step. Colder. More patient than they deserve. I know. Raquel looked at her daughter, searching for any sign of fear, but there was only fire. Calm, burning, and deliberate. If you change your mind, she said after a long beat, we move. Immediately. Ayanna nodded. If I need you, I'll say the word. Marcus rose from his chair, placed a firm hand on her shoulder, and gave it a single grounding squeeze. I've seen men crack under less pressure than this, he said. But I've never seen you flinch. Ayanna's eyes didn't soften, but something beneath them lit warmer. Then let me show you what I do when I don't flinch. Monday morning arrived beneath a slate-colored sky, the kind that made the trees sway harder and the air feel heavier, even without rain. Eisenhower High's flag whipped against the pole with a crack of wind as students filtered in, slouched under backpacks, their voices rising and falling in the same restless rhythm that marked the start of every week. But this morning was different. This morning, Ayanna Cole returned from suspension. She walked through the front doors without hesitation, her pace steady, her posture exact. Her clothes were plain. Black jeans, black hoodie, no logos, no colors. Her earbuds were in, though no music played. She didn't want distraction. She wanted clarity. The hallway felt quieter as she passed. Not silent, but the kind of hush that lingers when people are watching and pretending not to. She could feel it in the way heads tilted ever so slightly, the way voices dipped behind locker doors, the way Bryce's name kept surfacing in fragments, sometimes triumphant, sometimes mocking, but never quiet. She didn't flinch. She didn't break stride. She made her way to her locker, opened it with smooth precision, and exchanged her books as though nothing had happened. But inside, her senses were tracking everything. The footsteps behind her, the rustle of fabric, the shifting glances, and, most of all, the words. So she's back already? Guess slamming someone doesn't get you expelled if you check the right boxes. She probably cried to her parents. You know how they play it. She ignored them. Every word, every whisper, every fake cough that masked the word aggressive or angry was noted and filed away in the quiet, meticulous cabinet of her memory. Bryce was louder now, not in volume, but in presence. He stood taller when she passed him in the halls, eyes tracking her with a smirk that didn't bother hiding its edge. He had become the face of a story they had twisted to fit their comfort. A white boy victimized by the angry black girl. It was easier for people to believe that version. Simpler. Cleaner. The first real jab came at lunch. She sat alone, as usual, near the end of the long cafeteria table by the vending machines. Halfway through her sandwich, A milk carton landed on her tray with a wet thud, tipping sideways and spilling across her notes. She didn't move at first. Didn't even blink. Then she looked up. Bryce stood 3 feet away, arms out as if to say, "Oops," his eyes dancing with mock innocence. 2 of his teammates sat nearby, shoulders bouncing with quiet laughter, one of them already sliding his phone back into his hoodie pocket. "Clumsy hands," Bryce said, shaking his head. "Maybe you should work on your reflexes." "Or was that part of your training, too?" She stared at him, calm, measured. Her hand moved, not toward him, but toward the small towel in her bag, which she used to blot the spill with precise, practiced movements. "You must really need attention," she said, not looking up. "Is it that hard, living in the shadow of someone smarter?" He scoffed, stepped closer, voice lowering so only she could hear. "You can try to act unbothered, but you're 1 video away from being done. You think people are on your side. They're not. You're the angry girl who snapped. And we made sure they saw it that way." She finished wiping her paper. Her fingers folded the damp notes once, neatly, and tucked them back into her bag. She rose slowly, eyes level with his now. "Then keep talking," she said. "Keep pushing. Keep pretending this ends the way you think it does. Is that a threat?" He smirked. "Yes," she said. And then she walked past him. The hallway after lunch was worse. Someone had scrawled, "Keep your hands to yourself, animal," on the whiteboard in one of the empty study rooms. It had been partially erased, but not before she saw it. Not before half the school had. In the girls' bathroom, someone whispered loud enough for her to hear, "Bet she learned that takedown at home. Probably gets beat by her daddy when she talks back." Every time, she did not respond. Not because it didn't cut, but because she was saving her blade for the right strike. At night, her room transformed. The wall above her desk had become a grid of notes and timestamps, dates of specific incidents, names, locations. Her laptop was password protected, encrypted, and updated daily with voice memos, photos, saved chat messages, and quietly recorded conversations. She'd bought a tiny wearable mic online, one that clipped under her hoodie collar, capturing everything from class conversations to hallway harassment. She didn't trust the system. She didn't trust adults to protect her. But she trusted her preparation. "You sure you don't want us to start knocking on doors?" her mother asked from the hallway one night, arms crossed, voice low. Ayanna didn't look away from her screen. "Not yet." Raquel nodded once, though her jaw stayed tight. "You're better than me." "No," Ayanna said. "Just colder." Raquel paused, then placed a quiet hand on her shoulder. "Don't freeze all the way through, baby. Just long enough to survive it." Ayanna didn't reply. She just leaned into the silence and kept typing. Every name on her list would slip. Sooner or later, someone would get comfortable. And when they did, Ayanna wouldn't raise her voice. She'd raise the volume. It was just after 4th period, when the day shifted. The kind of afternoon that wore no warning signs, no storm clouds, no announcements over the intercom, no sudden change in the light, just the slow crawl of inevitability disguised as routine. Students filled the halls in clusters, some drifting lazily between lockers, others jostling toward the courtyard where the breeze had finally begun to cool the sting of early spring heat. Ayanna moved among them with the same quiet rhythm she had perfected, her steps measured, her backpack snug against her spine, earbuds in with the volume turned all the way down. But she could feel it before it happened. The space behind her felt too quiet. Not absent of sound, but absent of randomness, like something had been rehearsed. She turned the corner past the old theater wing, the hallway narrowing, traffic thinning, lockers dented and faded with age. Most students didn't come this way anymore, too far from the main classrooms, too easy to be forgotten, which is why she chose it. They were waiting before she saw them. Bryce stepped out first from behind the stairwell door, his expression smug, self-satisfied, the mask he wore whenever he thought he had already won. Behind him, Cody and Trent emerged from opposite directions, one down the side corridor near the old janitor's closet, the other walking with deliberate casualness from the direction of the science wing. None of them said anything. Not at first. Ayanna stopped. Her eyes flicked from one to the other, mapping distance, noting the exits. Her heart didn't race. Her breath didn't quicken. She had been preparing for this since the first time they laughed at her pain, like it was a skit. "So," Bryce said, arms spreading slightly, "you're still walking around here like nothing happened." She didn't respond. Cody stepped in closer, grinning. "Not so tough without your daddy in the room," Trent snorted. "Or your lawyers." Ayanna tilted her head, gaze sweeping across their faces. Not fearfully, not warily, but with the kind of detached interest one gives to a ticking clock. "You really think this is smart?" she asked, her voice even, calm, surgical. "Cornering me again, with phones everywhere, with people watching?" "Nobody's watching," Bryce said, "and no one's gonna care if you cry for help again. You've already used up your outrage points." Ayanna took a single step forward, deliberately closing the space between her and Bryce by an inch. "You think I'm scared of you?" she asked, voice dropping lower. "You think just because you swung and missed once, you'll get another chance to land something?" Bryce's smirk twitched. Just slightly. She looked at Cody now. "How's your D- in chemistry? Still struggling with basic combustion?" His grin faded. Then to Trent. "Still can't make the varsity cut unless you ride his coattails? Must be exhausting, being backup muscle to someone who can't think without an audience." Trent shifted his weight, jaw tightening. "You've got a real mouth," Bryce said, stepping in closer. "You've got a real pattern," Ayanna said. 3 boys, 1 girl, no cameras. You waited until I was alone. You always do. Because you're cowards. And deep down, you know it." Bryce's voice lost its cool. "You're not walking away this time." Ayanna's chin rose slightly, eyes sharp. "Good." Then she turned and ran. Not from fear, but into the plan. Her steps were fast but controlled, her route already mapped. She moved down the back corridor, turned at the west stairwell, and bolted through the glass doors that led to the open-air commons, a wide courtyard framed by the main cafeteria and 2 wings of classrooms. At this hour, it buzzed with foot traffic. Dozens of students sat at picnic tables. Others leaned against the brick walls, phones out, earbuds in, lost in their worlds. Ayanna burst through the double doors at a calculated pace, fast enough to draw attention, slow enough to keep them close. They followed, just as she knew they would. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. "Hey!" Bryce shouted behind her. A few heads turned. She stopped in the center of the commons, near the old concrete planter shaped like a fountain that hadn't worked in years. Students turned to look, drawn by the urgency in Bryce's voice and the sheer incongruity of Ayanna, who almost never drew attention. Now standing motionless with 3 boys bearing down on her, she turned slowly. Now there were eyes. Now there were phones. "I knew you'd come," she said, her voice carrying in the courtyard, not loud, but sharp enough to slice through the murmur. "Don't flatter yourself," Bryce said, breath heavy now, face flushed. "You're about to get what you deserve." "No," Ayanna said. "You are." And that's when she saw it. The glint of phones rising, students shifting, hands raising devices as instinct kicked in. They sensed something was happening, though they didn't yet understand what. Bryce looked around, realizing too late where they were, how exposed they were. How many cameras now pointed at him, recording every step, every twitch of aggression, every word from his mouth. He stepped forward anyway. "You think anyone's gonna believe your side this time?" he growled. "You think this changes anything?" "No," Ayanna said. "I'm just here to make sure everyone sees it." Trent moved to flank her. Cody circled wide. The crowd grew. The air shifted, and as Bryce reached for her, the space between them collapsed. The next minutes would be chaos. But this was the moment. And Ayanna didn't blink. Time didn't slow. It sharpened. Every breath, Every shift of movement, every flicker of weight between footfalls came into focus with a clarity Ayanna knew by feel rather than thought. Her muscles didn't ask permission. They responded, honed by years of drills, nights in the garage with her mother counting out strikes, mornings with her father demanding balance, breathing, silence. The moment Bryce lunged, she was already moving. Not away, not back, but forward, into the space where chaos waited to crown the unprepared. His hand reached for her, clumsy and fast, all impulse, no aim. She twisted her shoulder just enough to make him miss, her foot snapping back and up in one fluid motion, heel connecting with the side of his knee, in a precise, brutal check that knocked him off balance. His foot caught on the edge of the planter, and he stumbled, arms flailing for purchase. But before he could fall, Cody was already coming in from the right, trying to flank her, maybe thinking he'd grab her, restrain her, hold her in place, like she was some fragile thing that just needed to be pinned to stop being a problem. He didn't expect the elbow. It drove back into his ribs with clean, compact force. No wasted motion, just a sharp turn of her torso and a backward drive of bone into soft muscle. He gasped, stumbled sideways, and caught himself against the edge of the bench, where a group of underclassmen were already recording, eyes wide. Trent was the last to move, but the most dangerous. Taller than Bryce, heavier, and clearly under the impression that mass alone equaled control. He rushed her, chest forward like a lineman, fists clenched in some cartoon version of aggression. Ayanna dropped low, her legs swept out in a tight arc, hooking behind his ankle while her palms struck his sternum, sending all his momentum forward as his feet betrayed him. He collapsed hard against the ground with a grunt and a clatter of knees and elbows. And by the time he rolled onto his back, Ayanna was already upright again. The courtyard had frozen. What began as scattered curiosity had become a full audience. Phones were everywhere. Students who had been mid-laugh or mid-bite or mid-scroll were now watching, silent, jaws slack, unsure whether to cheer, gasp, or run for help. Bryce was back on his feet now, his pride more bruised than his body. His face twisted with something ugly, rage mixed with embarrassment, the red blotch of it climbing up his neck as he roared and charged again, all form abandoned. No strategy, just blind fury. He threw a punch. She ducked. Another. She pivoted. His third strike came too wide, too high, and she caught his wrist, spun with him, and used his own momentum to pull him off axis. Her foot planted, her weight shifted, and Bryce crashed into the concrete hard enough to rattle his teeth. This time, he didn't scramble back up. He stayed down, breathing hard, groaning. And then, laughter. Not from her, from the crowd. Low at first, disbelieving, then rising. Students covering their mouths, shaking their heads, backing away in half-shocked amusement as the reality settled in. Bryce Whittaker, the quarterback, the golden boy, the walking smirk of privilege, lay sprawled on his back beside a broken pencil case and someone's spilled water bottle. His lip bleeding, his pride shattered. Cody was still clutching his ribs. Trent hadn't gotten up yet. Ayanna stood alone in the center of the commons, breathing deep and steady. Not panting, not wild, just present. Alive in a way none of them had expected. She didn't gloat. She didn't pose. She simply turned, slowly, scanning the crowd with an expression that wasn't angry, wasn't proud, just resolved. And when her eyes locked on a girl standing near the second row of benches, phone raised, lips parted, Ayanna gave a single, silent nod. Capture that, she thought. One voice rang out above the laughter. 3 of you! And you still lost? Damn! Another burst followed. Then more. She folded you like laundry. Bro, how you gonna get rocked in front of everyone again? Bryce pushed himself up onto his elbows, eyes wide and wild now, searching for something to anchor himself in, anything that could undo what had just happened. But the crowd wasn't going to unsee it. The footage wasn't going to unfilm itself. And Ayanna wasn't going to apologize. Security arrived seconds later, too late to do anything but pick up the pieces. One of the assistants tried to raise his voice, shouting for everyone to disperse, but it was hopeless. The crowd had already broken into scattered waves of stunned conversation and retreating steps, most of them clutching phones with shaky fingers and eyes full of disbelief. "You! With the black hoodie! Stay right there!" one guard barked. Ayanna didn't move. She looked down at Bryce one last time, still crumpled at her feet, and said nothing. Because there was nothing left to say. He had started this. She had finished it. And the world had seen it happen. The video hit the school's internal message boards before the bell even rang for 7th period. By the end of the day, it had spread to Snapchat stories, Instagram reels, and 2 different TikTok edits, one with dramatic music, one slowed down with sarcastic captions circling each of Bryce's failed punches like a sports replay. None of them showed Ayanna starting the fight. None of them needed to. She had stood her ground. She had defended herself. And now the world was watching. By Tuesday morning, the front office was in full containment mode. Teachers had been issued directives to avoid discussion of the incident until the investigation concluded. Students were told not to circulate sensitive material during school hours. The morning announcements skipped their usual cheer squad reminders and jumped straight to a mandatory assembly notice for Thursday. It didn't matter. The school was already on fire. The footage had been reposted by an alum account with nearly 10,000 followers. It reached beyond the zip code by lunch. Other schools were reacting. Comments flooded in, some cheering, some confused, some angry that it had taken this for anyone to notice what Ayanna had been dealing with in the first place. But what no one could ignore was the headline that began forming in whispers and scrolls, 3-on-1, and the girl didn't flinch. Ayanna moved through the halls that day like a ripple through glass. Some students stepped out of her path. Others nodded, awkward but admiring. A few looked away entirely, clearly unsure whether they were supposed to laugh, applaud, or stay out of it. She didn't speak to any of them, not yet. Let them process. Let the silence do the work. In the principal's office, the walls felt tighter than usual, the smiles more brittle, the language sharper, more clipped. Principal Larkin didn't ask how Ayanna was. She didn't offer water. She didn't mention the bruises on Bryce's chin, or Trent's limp, or the fact that Cody hadn't returned to school since the incident. She folded her hands on the desk and began with a tone that tried and failed to sound neutral. "We're deeply concerned about the events that took place in the courtyard yesterday. While I understand there are multiple perspectives, what matters now is restoring calm and ensuring the safety of all students." Ayanna met her eyes without blinking. "Is that why no one stopped them the first time? Or the second? Or after they cornered me by the dumpsters?" Janet's smile tightened, barely perceptible. "We can't act on every hallway rumor, Ayanna." "You didn't act on the video either," she said, her voice low but sharp. "Not until it went public." Janet leaned back in her chair, expression shifting slightly. "What exactly are you suggesting?" "I'm not suggesting anything," Ayanna replied. "I'm just noticing what gets silence and what gets statements." Janet glanced down at her folder, lips pressing thin. "There will be a disciplinary process for all parties. I encourage you to write a reflection of the incident from your point of view. That may help the board during their review." Ayanna gave a slow nod. "You want a written account. We want clarity," Larkin said. "And cooperation." Ayanna rose. "You'll have both," she said. "On my terms." She left the office without another word. By the end of the day, the cafeteria buzzed with rumors of suspension hearings, disciplinary committees, and emergency staff meetings. Bryce had returned to school with a fresh jacket and a scab over his left cheekbone, walking stiffly and surrounded by 3 other football players who clearly thought forming a wall of muscle would reclaim some sense of order. It didn't. People still laughed when he passed. Not loudly, not cruelly, but not quietly enough to ignore. At home that evening, Ayanna didn't speak during dinner. Her parents didn't press her. They had seen the footage. Her mother had watched it once. Her father had watched it 3 times. No one said, "We're proud of you," and no one had to. It was in the silence, in the way Marcus nodded once when she passed him the salt, in the way Raquel wrapped up the leftovers with extra care, sealing the containers like she was preserving more than food. Afterward, Ayanna sat at her desk, laptop open, her fingers typing steadily. She wasn't writing a reflection. She was organizing the footage she hadn't shared yet. Clips from the past month, whispers caught on hallway audio, insults muttered behind her in class, teachers dismissing her with tired, condescending smiles, a compilation, not of punches, but of patterns. She was building something undeniable, not for the principal, not for the district, for everyone else. Because the school could bury a single fight. They couldn't bury a timeline. When she was finished, she exported the file, backed it up to 3 drives, and saved a copy to a private folder synced to a cloud account, registered under a name no one at school knew. The last thing she did before closing the lid was write a single-line email to herself, "Release only if they try to silence me again." Then she stood, stretched, and turned off the light. The next day would bring a dozen more whispers, a few side eyes, some fake concern, a couple backhanded compliments. It didn't matter. They'd taken their swing. She was still standing. By Wednesday morning, the walls of Eisenhower High weren't whispering anymore. They were buckling. What had begun as a single video of a courtyard fight had unraveled into something far larger. And no matter how tightly the administration tried to grip the reins, the narrative refused to obey. Parents were calling. Emails flooded the district inbox. Alumni were chiming in on social media, demanding accountability. And more damning than any one post were the subtle shifts happening in real time. The way students had stopped laughing in hallways and started recording everything. Not just Ayanna. Everyone. The school had become a stage, and no one trusted who was holding the curtain. The 3 boys, Bryce, Cody, and Trent, still walked in formation, but their armor had thinned. Cody avoided eye contact. Trent kept his hoodie up. Bryce tried to maintain the smirk, the stride, the illusion that none of this had touched him. But even the smugness had cracks. He barked at a classmate in history when they asked about the video. He shoved a freshman against a locker for filming him at lunch. The mask was slipping, and Ayanna watched it disintegrate with the patience of someone who had already seen the end of the reel. She didn't need to retaliate. The footage was doing it for her. Students whispered her name now, not with contempt, but with caution. Some with admiration. A few tried to approach, offering side comments about how crazy that takedown was or how they always knew Bryce was trash, but Ayanna offered no invitations for friendship. She wasn't interested in alliances built on convenience. She wasn't interested in comfort. She was interested in completion. The school called another assembly. Short notice. Mandatory. The email arrived that morning with careful wording. A discussion on community, values, and safety. Ayanna read the subject line twice, then closed the screen. They weren't just stalling now, they were bleeding. By the time the gym filled with restless students and a podium was wheeled to center court, the silence carried a different weight. Students were no longer disengaged. They were watching. Phones weren't out, but only because everyone had one hand hovering near their pocket, waiting. Principal Larkin stepped up to the microphone, her smile thinner than usual, her blazer darker, her words crisp and pre-polished. "We want to thank you for your patience as we continue to address the events that have recently occurred on campus. As always, Our priority is the safety and unity of our student body. Ayana sat near the middle of the bleachers, hoodie up, gaze forward, unreadable. What we've seen online, Larkin continued, has been difficult. But it's important to remember that social media is only one part of a complex situation. We encourage all students to come forward through proper channels. The administration is here to listen. We value your voices. Students shifted. A few rolled their eyes. Some looked at Ayana. She didn't move, didn't blink. Larkin went on, weaving a speech that sounded like concern, but landed like damage control. There was no mention of her by name. No mention of the boys either. Just a vague fog of community, conflict resolution, and restoring trust. She might as well have been reading the script of a crisis PR firm. By the time the microphone clicked off, no one clapped. They were dismissed in silence. In third period, Ayana received an email. It was from the district. A formal invitation to meet with the Regional Equity Coordinator. We are conducting a full review of recent disciplinary decisions and would value your perspective as part of that process. She read it once, twice, then flagged it. The trap was closing. That evening, she sat in the living room with her laptop open, her parents seated across from her. Her father had just returned from base. Her mother had put her phone on silent and placed it screen down on the coffee table. "You sure you want to move on this now?" Raquel asked, her tone calm but watchful. "You dropped that file, and there's no going back to silence." Ayana nodded once. "They're already running damage control. I want the next move to be mine." Marcus leaned forward. "What's the goal?" "Exposure," Ayana said. "Not just the fight. Everything. Every time I was dismissed. Every time a teacher heard and did nothing. Every time the office said it wasn't enough." Raquel raised an eyebrow. "And after that?" Ayana's voice didn't waver. "Accountability." Her father gave a small, satisfied nod. "Send it to the district. But don't post it yet." "I'm not," she said. "I'm giving them the option. Fix it quietly, or I go public." Raquel looked at her daughter for a long moment, then reached across the table and handed her a small flash drive, encrypted. Just in case. Ayana took it without a word. Thursday morning came. The school woke up to a different kind of tension. A news van had been spotted outside the main entrance. A local journalist, quiet, persistent, and known for running hard on community issues, was seen walking into the main office with a camera bag and a notebook. Ayana walked the halls with her head high. Bryce stood by the vending machines, stiff, eyes flicking toward her with something new. Not arrogance, not even hatred. Uncertainty. By lunch, students had begun to whisper a new question. "Did you see the leak?" The email went out at exactly 8:02 a.m. No subject line, no salutation, just a single hyperlink, followed by 4 words typed in black, bold, and unflinching. "You didn't protect her." It hit inboxes all at once. Students, teachers, administrators, and district officials. Just a single hyperlink, followed by 4 words typed in black, bold, and unflinching. "You didn't protect her." It hit inboxes all at once. Students, teachers, administrators, and district officials. By 8:07, it had been forwarded over 100 times. By 8:15, it had been posted to 3 private student groups and 2 parent-run Facebook pages. By 8:21, the local reporter who'd visited the school the day before tweeted the link with a single word: unbelievable. Ayana sat at her desk in first period, hoodie pulled low, headphones in but silent. Her eyes focused on the pages of her notebook. Though she wasn't reading, she didn't need to watch it again. She had lived every frame. The video opened not with fists, not with shouting, but with a still image of her locker, covered in syrup. Then the audio file played, Bryce's voice. "Go back to Africa." Then Cody's laughter. The water fountain incident followed. The recorded harassment outside the cafeteria. The whiteboard slur. A spreadsheet slid into frame, dated and time-stamped, listing over 20 incidents across 3 months. each supported by an audio clip, screenshot, or brief video segment. The pattern was undeniable. Coordinated, repeated, unpunished. Then came the fight. Unedited, wide angle, 3 against 1. Ayanna didn't narrate it. There was no voiceover, no plea, no dramatic music. Just the raw, ugly, perfect truth. The final minute of the video showed an email chain. Her formal complaint. The school's curt response. Her suspension letter. It ended with Principal Larkin's voice at the last assembly saying, "Social media is only one part of a complex situation." And silence. No credits. No calls to action. Just truth. Hanging there like a blade above the school. By second period, Eisenhower High was no longer a school. It was a crime scene. Classes still happened, but no one listened. Students stared at their phones in stunned silence. Teachers stood awkwardly at the front of classrooms, some trying to ignore it, others pretending not to have seen it yet. But the ones who mattered, students who had been told to let it go, teachers who had heard the slurs and kept walking, administrators who had weighed Ayanna's silence against Bryce's jersey, they had seen it. They had heard it, and they were afraid. In third period, Ayanna was pulled from class, but this time it wasn't the front office. It was the district superintendent's office. A tall man in a crisp navy suit stood waiting near the doorway with a clipboard in hand and a face she hadn't seen before. "We'd like to speak with you," he said, not unkindly. "Privately." She nodded once. The room they led her to wasn't Larkin's office. It was upstairs, where the district occasionally held board reviews. The table was long, the windows large. Her parents were already there, seated with their backs straight, and their expressions unreadable. Both of them had said nothing publicly in the past week. They hadn't needed to. Ayanna's silence had spoken loud enough. The superintendent didn't waste time. "What you've shown us is deeply disturbing," he said. "We are opening a full investigation, effective immediately." Ayanna said nothing. "We've placed Principal Larkin on administrative leave, pending review. Bryce Whitaker, Cody Randall, and Trent Ellis are also suspended indefinitely. Formal expulsion hearings are being scheduled." Still, she didn't speak. "We will be issuing a public apology, both to you and your family, and the school board has requested to meet with you directly." At that, Ayanna tilted her head slightly. "Why?" "Because we failed," the man said. "And they know it." Raquel glanced toward her daughter, but Marcus was already watching her. He didn't smile, just nodded once, as if confirming what he'd always known she was capable of. Ayanna looked down at her hands, folded neatly on the table. "I don't want a statement," she said finally. "I want change." "You'll have it," the superintendent said. "Not promises, not optics. Policy, procedure, oversight." He nodded slowly. "Understood." She stood. "Then I have nothing else to say." Word spread quickly that Principal Larkin had been escorted off campus by noon. The news broke by early afternoon, first on the local network, then on national feeds by dinner time. The headline was simple, brutal, and clean. "Black students' hidden recordings expose pattern of abuse and school negligence." By Friday, Bryce's name had been pulled from the team roster. His father had deleted his social media accounts. Trent's mother issued a vague apology about boys needing guidance. Cody tried to claim he had been just standing there, but the audio said otherwise. The school issued its official response 2 days later, but by then no one was reading it. The internet had already passed judgment. And Ayanna? She returned to school Monday morning wearing the same black hoodie. Her steps were steady, her gaze clear. Some students clapped when she walked into first period. She didn't respond. Others tried to talk to her, offer support, ask for interviews. She waved them off gently. This wasn't about being famous. It was about being seen, about never being dismissed again. And as she sat down at her desk, pulled out her notes, and opened her pen, She didn't smile. Not yet, because the fight wasn't over. But it was hers now. The sunlight was softer now, casting long amber slants across the polished tile floor as Ayanna walked the halls of Eisenhower High one final time before spring break. The building still looked the same. Same chipped corners on the lockers, same faded posters for prom and SAT prep, same water fountain with its stubborn wheeze, but the weight of it had changed. The silence that once stalked her down these corridors had lost its teeth. The stares that used to follow her weren't loaded with smirks and suspicion anymore. They were quiet, respectful, cautious, and she didn't need them. She wasn't here to be admired. She was here to finish what she started. 2 weeks had passed since the video changed everything, and the ripples hadn't stopped. The school board had issued a formal statement acknowledging systemic oversight and the failure to act on student safety concerns. Larkin had quietly resigned before the investigation could finish burying her. Bryce's family withdrew him from the district altogether. The other two followed soon after, their lockers cleared by faculty under quiet supervision. No apologies were sent to Ayanna directly. Not from them. But that was fine. She hadn't asked for remorse. She had asked for truth. And truth, once exposed, didn't go back into hiding. A new policy had been introduced, one requiring all harassment complaints to be reviewed by an independent equity liaison within 72 hours. Audio submissions were now accepted as valid evidence. Students were being trained on their rights. Faculty underwent mandatory workshops on racial bias, led not by the same tired consultants from the district's endless revolving door, but by outside voices, people with real histories, real scars, and no patience for pretend solutions. Ayanna didn't attend those meetings. She had lived them already. It wasn't about pretending that justice had been done. It wasn't about tying a ribbon around the mess and calling it progress. There were still students who hadn't spoken to her, teachers who wouldn't meet her eyes, systems that, even now, resisted change unless cornered. But there were also students she had never spoken to before, girls who now stopped her in the hallway just to say thank you without needing to explain why. There were boys who had once laughed with Bryce and now looked down when she passed, their smirks gone, their masks peeled back. There were teachers, only a few, but enough, who had started asking different questions in class, listening more closely, watching the corners of the room where silence used to hide ugly things. Change wasn't loud. It was deliberate, slow. But it had started. Ayanna stepped out into the courtyard where it had all unraveled, where Bryce had charged at her with rage burning in his throat, and nothing left to shield him. The broken water fountain at the center had been replaced just last week. Shiny, smooth steel now, no rust, no cracks. She had walked past it twice before she noticed the small black plaque fastened at its base. Let silence be a shield only for those with peace, not protection for cruelty. No name, no attribution, just a message. She sat on the edge of the planter, pulling a notebook from her bag, not for class, but for herself, not to study, but to write. She didn't write about the fight. She didn't write about the pain. She wrote about the strategy, the preparation, the strength required not just to act, but to wait until the moment was hers. She didn't think of it as a journal. It was more like a guide for someone else, someone younger, someone watching, because someone always was. Raquel had told her that once, back when she was 10, learning to thread a punch through a hanging tire in the backyard and complaining about her wrists hurting. Her mother had adjusted her stance, then knelt beside her, the sweat still fresh on her forehead, and said, "You don't train for the fight in front of you. You train for the eyes behind you." At the time, Ayanna didn't understand. Now she did. She heard footsteps behind her. Marcus approached quietly, hands in his pockets, not breaking her train of thought. "They called again," he said, voice low and even. Wants to know if you'll speak at the school board meeting next month. Ayanna looked up from her notebook. About what? He shrugged. Whatever you want. They're not asking to frame your words this time. They just want you to speak. She paused. I'll think about it. He nodded. You don't have to say anything. What you've already done is louder than most people manage in a lifetime. She closed the notebook, stood, and fell in step beside him. The two of them walked toward the lot in silence, the afternoon breeze tugging at her sleeves. Students passed them, some smiling, some just watching. None bold enough to interrupt. They didn't need to. Ayanna had already said everything, and when she stepped into the car, when she slid the door shut and rested her head back against the seat, she didn't feel tired. She didn't feel vindicated. She felt ready. There would be other halls, other names, other versions of Bryce, but she'd carry every lesson with her, every second of stillness, every breath between insult and action, every pause before the strike, because strength wasn't in the hit, it was in the wait. And she would never wait passively again. The hallway still looked the same. Same peeling corkboard just outside the counselor's office, same cluster of faded college brochures stacked unevenly in a metal rack. Same familiar creak in the third locker from the left near the science wing. Eisenhower High hadn't changed its bones, but the way it moved, the way it breathed around her, felt different now. Not louder, not quieter, just honest. There was nothing left hiding in the walls. No fear of what was whispered behind her. No expectation of where the next hit would come from. She walked through it all, with nothing clinging to her heels. She didn't look over her shoulder. She didn't need to. It was a little past noon when she passed the water fountain. The same one where Bryce had once pressed his palm to the spout and mocked her like history was a joke, and cruelty was just charisma in another form. It had been scrubbed clean now. New stainless steel piping, polished edges, the sensor finally working so no one had to press a button to drink. She slowed her steps, looked at it, and after a moment, she leaned forward and drank. No one blocked her, no one watched. Just water, clear, cold, hers. She stood straight and wiped her mouth with the back of her hand, then turned to find three girls standing near the hallway lockers. Their conversation cut short mid-sentence. One of them, short with thick glasses and a well-worn poetry book in her arm, offered a hesitant smile. "Hey," she said. "That video," Ayanna tilted her head slightly. "We saw it," the girl continued. "Everything you posted after. Not just the fight. The receipts. All of it." The tallest of the three, braids pulled tight and neat across her scalp, stepped forward now. "We used to think we had to deal with it on our own. Like saying anything would make it worse. It usually did," the third girl added softly. Ayanna said nothing. She didn't have to. "But not after you," the tall one said. "Now they know we watch each other, that we're not going quiet again." For a second, none of them spoke. Then Ayanna offered a simple nod. "What's your name?" "Jada." "Denise." "Saria." The names landed gently, without performance. Not introductions, but acknowledgments. "Y'all sit anywhere in the cafeteria?" Ayanna asked. They exchanged glances. "Used to sit near the back wall. People'd say stuff." "Not anymore." Ayanna nodded again. "Good. Then save me a seat." They smiled. Real ones this time, not the kind stretched over nerves. Just wide, grateful, unburdened. She walked with them toward the courtyard as the bell rang for lunch, and the crowd spilled into the sunlight. People waved at her now, casually, like it wasn't a headline anymore. Just a part of life. One boy pointed at her and said something she didn't catch, but his tone held admiration, not mockery. A younger girl from freshman English asked if she could walk with them. Ayanna gave a subtle nod. She didn't lead them. She just didn't walk alone anymore. At their table, someone had left a folded napkin with a quote scribbled in black ink. "You spoke without shouting, and we still heard you." No name. No need. She tucked it into the inside flap of her notebook without comment. Lunch passed in easy waves. Small talk about music, prom, group projects, the science teacher who still pronounced photosynthesis like it was a French dish. Ayanna didn't dominate the conversation. She didn't need to. She listened, laughed quietly, chimed in when it mattered. Her silence no longer needed to protect her. It had done its work. Now it could rest. After lunch, she stopped by the library. The librarian, Ms. Park, who had once given her detention for having a tone, glanced up and nodded slightly. She didn't say anything. Ayanna didn't expect her to. Some apologies came late, wrapped in gestures instead of words. She picked out a book. Not for research, not for evidence, just fiction. And she read for the first time in months without feeling like she had to stay alert. The final bell rang with its usual buzz, and she walked the halls one more time, slow and unbothered. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. A message from the district. The new student equity panel had been formed. They were inviting her to speak, this time on her own terms. She didn't answer right away. She stepped outside, into the light breeze curling through the courtyard. The fountain gleamed behind her. The school, for all its flaws, now stood as a place that knew her name for the right reasons. Not because she bled to prove it, but because she refused to vanish inside it. At the far end of the lot, her mother's SUV pulled up smooth and steady. The window rolled down slightly. "Good day?" Raquel asked, sunglasses pushing her hair back. Ayanna opened the door and climbed in, setting her backpack on the floor between her feet. "Yeah," she said. "It was." Raquel didn't press further. She didn't need to. As they pulled away from the school, Ayanna glanced back only once. Not to check if she was being followed. Not to relive what had happened. Just to remind herself. She was never walking that place the same way again, and neither was anyone else. I hope you enjoyed that story. Please share it with your friends, and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.